Hey HTA, and today we're playing some more Mindustry. Last time around we conquered this nice little biomass facility and we started to actually produce some spores. We're not really using them yet, so maybe today will be that day. It seems we are now 6 levels in and we probably have still quite a few to go considering how large this planet is, not even counting all the optional zones we have available, but we actually have several quest related or campaign related levels available to us as well. I think it's like 4 of them or something like that. I actually have no idea which one to pick, so I'm just gonna go for the closest one, and because that happens to be called Windswept Islands, that sounds actually quite nice. Let's go for that one. It's a medium threat level, so hopefully it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Let's see if we can max everything out. Is there anything important that we're missing? I don't think so. We should be fine like this. And we have touchdown, which I completely failed to actually record, so sorry about that. So let's see, we are actually on a bunch of islands, definitely. I'm not sure if they're windswept, but considering all the sand, if there is any wind, that is definitely going to sweep at us. There is quite a lot of islands. Look at that, look at that. That's a whole bunch of islands. Actually, I kind of like this map. I am wondering how we are going to be transporting stuff across this map, though, but I guess we'll find out in a moment. The enemy is going to come up from north. That means that, that's actually quite interesting because that's going to make it very hard to build static defenses to defend against that enemy. Because they can pretty much, well, with the AI enabled, they might actually just go around or something like that. Not sure if they're that smart, but let's see. If we look at this island, for example, that should be kind of in the way of their path at least. Yeah, this is going to be quite a challenge to actually set up defenses. I do think if we build defenses on this island and that island and maybe some more on this side of this island, we should be able to capture pretty much everything. That being said, there is not a lot of resources on these islands though. The water doesn't seem to be too deep, and I do think we can cross areas like that. Yes, we can. So, okay, there is some ruins over here as well. Some containers, it seems. I'm not sure what we're going to do with those. Oh, look, there's more. Liquid tank, oil extractor. Okay, interesting. We are over here, and then these islands are mostly empty. Yes. That's interesting. There is not a lot of building space actually here. I mean, it looks like large islands, but most of that island is something you can't actually build on. It is worth noting that something I keep forgetting at least, that you can actually build in the water. So, for example, over here, as long as you're in that light blue water, you can build there. So the islands are bigger than they seem. It also holds over here. We can easily make a whole line of turrets, for example, over here and still defend against whatever is going to land there. My goal for today is to take a little bit of a different approach than what I've been doing in the last few levels. All of you have been giving me some pretty decent, very awesome actually, tips and tricks in the comments. I'm going to be doing my best to incorporate some of those into my designs, and those designs are going to be aimed at keeping everything a little bit more cleaner, neater, compacter than before, especially considering we're going to have to revisit these levels. On Eric here, at some point I was like, yeah, well, I don't have the space to build, I need to build things differently every time around anyway, so there's not really much point in keeping things clear, but in these levels we are going to be revisiting them to redefend them, maybe optimize them if we get new technologies, so we might as well make sure we keep them as clean and tight as possible. Starting with that, I noted all of these little rocks for deletion because they keep annoying me. And yeah, so let's get us started. Starting with silicon, we need a nice clean design, I think, for silicon, so I'm going to be experimenting with that a little bit. It does need power, something we also need to work on, but maybe we can get the color raiders involved in that. We can have about 3 of these silicon smelters on a single belt of coal for now. We can always expand it once we get better belts. We need some sand, and there's going to be, again, about 3 belts worth of output there as well. So let's see, if we combine that with maybe a graphite press, because honestly we can only have 4.2 items on a belt instead of 4.5. The graphite press has a slightly lower demand on coal, so if we combine 2 silicon smelters and 1 graphite press, that is still slightly more than fits on a single belt, but it is very close to what we need, and we can make sure, at least with the graphite, we also don't overproduce, so we should be able to export everything on a single belt as well. So that should be nice. Now I want to combine all of that with the tip I got from Theta Phi in the comments that really started to get my gears turning, that I should be using underflow gates in my designs, and I'm doing exactly that here. So we have a silicon smelter over here, we have some sand generators that I'm going to have to boost with water in order to make sure that these are producing 3 sand per second, and this will be the coal belt coming in over here. Now the nice thing about this design, at least if it's working like I'm hoping it will, is that this is an underflow gate, so it's blocking everything that's going to go across if it can actually deliver things to the side. And there is a smelter here waiting for some coal. So if I have coal incoming on this belt, it should be exporting the coal to the actual factory if it has more coal than it can handle, which hopefully it will. The coal is going to be passing on this belt as well, but it's also going to be outputting the silicon that we're producing here onto the belt as well, because these drills are not connected to the belt. These won't get in the way, so I'm not polluting my belt with sand, and all of this should work, I think, pretty well. Now if I double up on this silicon production over here like so, I have a little nice gap in the middle, which we can then use to fill in a graphite smelter. And then we have, look, nice little square-ish type of design. Now remember, we do need power, so I think power nodes can go here and here. And I don't know, this looks like a thing that is worth making into a schematic. I'm not loving the position of this though, because if I get increased belts and things like that, additional production, I want to be able to fit something on the other side. Actually, that might still work. Let's see, this is 4 spaces. Yeah, we can actually still put a similar design on the other side as well. So, okay, I guess we're good to go. Similarly, I wanted to have a mining layout that I can just copy paste all over the place, and this is what I came up with. So I have a couple of mining drills over a node. I also have some bridge conveyors to export everything to go on the belt that is eventually going to be delivered to my factories. And then I have right next to that liquid routers going under those little bridges to make sure I can actually boost all of this stuff. So all in all, making sure that the water is coming from the outside. I do believe for most of the nodes will make sure that I can cover as many parts of the node as I can. And at the same time, I can make sure everything is boosted as long as I have water. So all in all, this looks pretty efficient to me. And in this specific case, I am also using some overflow gates just to make sure that if I'm producing more coal than I can put on a belt, which I am in this case, I can utilize the remaining coal just to generate some power just because I can. And oh man, this is beautiful. It's working exactly like intended. So the coal is coming in over here. It's being pushed into the silicon smelter by the underflow gate, and then it's putting out the rest of the silicon that it's producing back onto the belt, and it's exporting it to my core. As you can see, the other two are not doing anything, but that's because I still needed to build and boost this drill section over here. So as you can see, there's going to be more coal coming in, so that should mean that everything else on this line is also going to start to work, and I am loving it. And while I was just adding in the basics for my copper and lead production, I realized, yeah, I never actually boosted these sand drills, so the coal is not completely being used. Silly me. Let's fix that. There we go. As you can see, there's no overflow of coal anymore. Everything is actually getting absorbed by these facilities, and we're producing a pretty decent amount of silicon and graphite. Now, with all of these resources here, I can start building myself some air force, both for defense purposes as well as making sure I can get some monos going for additional mining of resources. We do have somewhere along this line, there's a little patch of copper available, as well as some patches of lead still. So that should make sure that I get a lot of those basic resources coming in really quickly whenever I need them. This means I have all the required production I need in order to get all my tier 1 units up and running, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm producing some monos, some flares, some crawlers, and some daggers. And if I've done my math correctly, we should have enough resources to actually cover all of that. Also, just like before, what I've done over here is I'm also again using these underflow gates just to make sure that all of these resources that these buildings require go into those buildings first. They're not going to be split across belts or anything like that I used to do before with the routers. No, they're going to go into these buildings if they can. If not, they're just going to continue onwards to my base. So as soon as all my unit production is capped out, I will be supplying my base with all of those same materials. This is costing me a little bit more power production than what I'm currently actually producing with some of the overflow from the coal, so let's put those spores to use. The math on these seems to be pretty straightforward. One cultivator produces 0.6 spores per second, and the actual power generation, if we look at that, that's the one over here, requires about 0.6 spores per second as well in order to produce 330 power. So the net gain of that should be 250 power per steam generator, more or less. Again, I'm not loving the fact that these things are not nicely rounded, but we'll have to work with what we have. So that should mean that a simple layout like this should produce about 500 spare power. Depending on where you actually build these pumps, they're going to be pumping out either 10 or 7 per second. So if you want to make sure you have at least the 24, I believe, water per second that you need, we, at least on one side, we need at least 4 of these pumps. If it's only a low water, if it's in the deep water, you only need 3 of them. But yeah, this layout should be able to be just copy pasted all over the place wherever we have water available. So once I built it, I actually realized there was a massive problem with this particular layout exactly because of the small disparity between the input and output. It's just 0.06, but still it is a little bit less production than what the steam generator is actually requiring. The power was turning on and off. So that's definitely not what you want to happen in a stable system. So what I'm doing here is I am putting in one additional cultivator to produce a little bit of additional spores. That should be enough to feed at least 10 steam generators just by splitting them. So I can expand this system for quite a bit more without it ever going to be flickering on and off. So that covers a lot of our basics. I have about a minute to spare, so I need to set up some additional defenses because I don't think those few air units that we've just produced are going to cut it. So how about this? I put a sorter over here that will be sorting for coal. If any coal gets on this line, it will be incinerated in this incinerator. And if it is not coal, so basically it's going to be graphite or silicon, it's going to be output to the sides, which is exactly where I wanted to go. Since an incinerator needs power, and I also want to use that power probably for other stuff over here as well, I figured why not just make some more power, because we can. Now the real question is, I have about 1 minute left. Am I actually going to be able to complete all of this in a timely fashion? And again, that probably means I should have started with this, but yeah, anyway. Well, the short answer is no, and that is because I completely forgot that in order to get all of this going, the power production actually needs power. And I tried to fix that with solar panels, which was a very bad idea because, as you can see, these things are producing a dreadful amount of power. And that's actually a very stupid thing of my side to do, because what I should have done is just use some of this coal that I had producing here anyway, and then just using a couple of these, not these steam generators, the combustion generators, because like I was doing before, I'm gonna have an overflow of coal anyway. So, you know, yeah. Well, the short answer is no, because I completely forgot that in order to get all of this rolling, I actually need some power, because, you know, these cultivators actually require power as well. And I tried to do that with solar panels, but these produce such a pitiful amount of power that it simply wasn't working. Well, at the same moment, I completely forgot that what I could have done is very simply just use a couple of these combustion generators and utilize these this coal production that I have over here as just a way to get the power rolling. As soon as the power is rolling, there won't be any problems. But yeah, definitely making my life a lot more difficult than it needed to be. Luckily, I do now have 4 flares, and remember, my own ship can shoot as well. So hopefully that is going to be enough to fend off the enemy for the first wave. What looks like the first wave is going to be exactly 1 unit, 1 flare to be exact, so my 5 of them should be able to fend that off pretty easily. And at the same time, look at that, I actually have some resources coming in. Now what I'm starting to wonder is, are all the enemies just going to be flying units because of all the water that might potentially get in the way of ground units? If so, then all of these hills are going to do exactly nothing. Well, I guess I'll find out while I'm expanding my defenses. As you can see, I weaved in some arcs because we have plenty of power to spare, and that's going to take care of any ground units that try to attack this. Now, any ground units that just ran past this are going to definitely be a problem, but if we set up a couple of similar defenses over here, That should kind of solve that, I think, because then they can either go here, which means they're going to be constantly under fire, or here, again, same thing, or here. And as you can see, I'm working my way down to make sure I have a whole battery of cannons set up there. And wave number 2 is once again just going to be a singular flying unit, so I'm probably going to have to set up some scatters along with these defenses as well. Okay, I think that should do for now. I added in some scatters everywhere. There's some lead on the way. It's not going to be a massively effective defense, but for now I think that should do. And that means we can start focusing on expanding the actual main production a little bit more. Before we get into that, it does seem that there are going to be some land units involved as well, so we definitely want to make sure we fortify this. But in order to do that, I want to make sure I get some tier 2 flying units in production, because all of this building is going to go pretty slow if I have to do it by myself. And because we have some more coal available here, I think we might just want to duplicate this setup a few times over. Now, I do want to point out, I did notice I actually have titanium on this map that I definitely want to start using. But that's new research, so I just want to make sure we get our boots on the ground, so to say, get everything going that we need to protect ourselves and to actually be able to kind of just freely build, and then we'll look into the new resources. So something like this. I am producing some more graphite and silicon over here that is going to funnel into these air factories so I can make tier 2 air units, because I also have the additive reconstructors over here that are going to soak up a whole lot of silicon and graphite. So honestly, just because of how much these things need, I'm probably going to need to build more of this. But in order to do that, I definitely want to start checking out what I can do with titanium, because if it works the same way as it does on air gear, titanium will allow me to make better belts. Okay, so that's plenty of titanium coming in. Now what can we actually do with it? Well, I think the shorter answer is what can't we do with it? Because honestly, by the looks of it, I just unlocked almost an entire second technology tree compared to what I already had available to me. However, most importantly, we have the titanium conveyor over here on the side, that is going to allow us to transport 11 items per second rather than the 4.2 that we've been transporting so far. So that's going to be by far the most important thing, at least for now. However, there's also other things like titanium walls. There's a whole bunch of new turrets that I can actually unlock. Some of them do need some resources that I don't currently have yet. But yeah, we're going to have plenty of choice of turrets. However, a lot of these things are, again, pretty expensive to make. So in order to get these going, we're going to have to produce plenty of titanium. So let's focus on getting those belts up and running first. There's another thing that I actually just saw, that we have a naval factory. So that's interesting, considering we are on a map that has a lot of water. And I assume this is actually naval as in water units. Oh, and as it turns out, the units that I thought was actually a type of ground unit is the naval unit itself. So the Rizzos that I just was killing in the first couple of waves are actually something I can now build myself. And the interesting thing is, we're not just going to need silicon for that, which has been the trend for all the other units so far, but we're going to finally have another use for metaglass. We also instantly get the tier 2 version of that, which is called the Mink. I'm not sure how to pronounce this otherwise, but that has a lot more health and armor than in the initial version. So I think this should do the trick. I have some more coal production, I have some more silicon and graphite production, I have some lead production that is turned into a very similar layout over here that is going to be producing metaglass. It's turning the lead into metaglass. And then the metaglass, silicon, and graphite is going to go into this facility over here. I'm using, once again, these underflow gates in order to make sure it actually goes into my production facilities for the tier 1 and tier 2 units. And then any superfluous materials is going to go all the way down on this very long belt in order to reach the core foundation. Now, let's see if this actually works. I should also note that actually building all of this stuff goes a lot faster now I have a little bit of help. And would you look at that, we have our first naval unit flying off into the distance to protect our base. Now, between all the ground, air, and apparently naval units, wasn't expecting naval units in this game, honestly, I think we should have no problem whatsoever to defend ourselves. Look at that, these ships are actually pretty huge. So let's just bring in another wave of units and see how this goes. So we have some Air units spawning apparently, no ground units. They are going to go sneakily off the side, and I've noticed that before, so this is where all the meta glass anti-air is actually coming in, because yeah, I'm producing it here anyway, might as well use it. And as you can see, that means there's no challenge whatsoever. Now let's see if we can actually get some other units to spawn as well. Yep, we have some ships going in here, but they're running into this defense line with my own ships and ground units as well. The air units seem to be inclined to go over here, which is a little bit dangerous considering I do have my power production here. It's extra power production I should add though, because this power production is actually just for this base, but it's not tied up to my main production, which maybe it should be, honestly, because if I do that, then it doesn't really matter if something gets destroyed over there. Okay, so a little bit of a time skip here, because I have been very busy just upgrading all of my production, and as you can see I have all kinds of random sushi belts almost coming into my main facility. It's all upgraded to titanium, or at least most of it is now upgraded to titanium, so you know, there's actually a massive amount of production happening. The thing with that production is that most of it is not very interesting. It's just very basic hubs, just producing basic materials like we've done before, so I'm not showing that in detail. I did upgrade my defensive line quite a bit, as you can see, and I made sure that all the overflow production is going to go back into a simple titanium throughput line, and of course this is able to handle 11 units per second, so that's almost 3 full belts of materials just feeding back into my main facility, and thereby making sure that we are utilizing all the stuff we're producing. Now, just to show you how the defensive line is working, the answer is pretty well. There's just some basic naval units coming in, but those are easily being destroyed. My flying units are auto-repairing my base as it gets damaged, and the air units are being taken care of very easily as well. We do have another boss coming in about 8 waves, but all in all, we are pretty much on autopilot. That said, there are a couple of awesome things I've now unlocked in the technology tree that are super useful. So for example, we have a larger power node. So if you compare the size of the current power node with the larger one, that does need titanium and silicon, so it's a fairly expensive one, but this makes sure we can very easily hook up everything to power. We also have a new drill available that is going to drill way faster than all the other drills that we've got so far, with the drawback that it does require a fair amount of power. But that means that we can massively start upgrading all of our production. Not sure it's quite needed to do that on this particular map, but yeah, this is way faster, and it can actually also still be boosted with water, and that means that we're definitely going to need those titanium to conveyors in order to handle all of the throughput that this is going to create. The nice thing about these laser drills, other than the fact that they're much faster, is also that they're larger, which actually makes it a little bit easier to just cover all the territory that you need, and you don't need as many belts going in and out, and same goes for the supply of the water. As you can see, I now have a completely stocked up belt of titanium just by very easily placing all of these down in the large power nodes, making sure it's also easy to get the power where it needs to go. I also unlocked 2 new units. We have the Nova and we have the Pulsar, which is the upgraded version. And these units actually repair other units, which is going to be massively useful if we're actually going to be attacking the enemy at some point in the future, rather than just sitting here and defend, which honestly is going to go pretty well, as you can see. I love the fact that these buildings are being auto-repaired, auto-rebuilt, etc, etc. That is a hugely useful functionality that wasn't actually in Eric here at all, I believe. But between being able to auto-repair my base and my units, that is a massive upgrade compared to what we had before. But that is not where the fun ends. We can unlock not 1, not 2, not 3. Can we also unlock some of these? Actually, didn't know there were gonna be more. Yeah, we can unlock 4 new types of turrets. That brings us to, what is it? 10 different types of turrets already, with a lot more to go. Yeah, we are going to have plenty of choices how to optimize our facility. First up is the Lancer. This is pretty much an upgraded version of the Arc by the looks of it. It's using power in order to fuel itself, and we can put in additional water, like with pretty much every turret, I think, to make it fire even faster. But that means that for this particular map, these things are awesome, because I can just build them like right on the edge of the water and make sure they have water flowing in, and we already have plenty of power to spare, so these things are going to be completely destroying the enemy. Next on the list is the Parallax, which is a tractor beam that pulls in air targets, damaging them in the process. Now the nice thing I can do with that is if I build them, for example, over here in the middle of a massive amount of anti-air turrets, not only can I damage more air units around them, look at the range on these things by the way, I can also just pull those air units into the place where they do not want to be. So yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. Next up on the list is the Salvo, which I think is going to be the backbone of the next few defensive lines that we're going to be building. Why? Because it doesn't need power, so that's nice. It also shoots at both ground and air, which is awesome, and it takes in pretty much any type of ammunition that we can currently make. It's also able to be boosted by water still, so yeah, this has pretty much everything you need. It might not be particularly strong in any specific area, but because it's all around, it's always going to be useful against the enemy. And then last but not least, we have the Ripple, which is pretty much like a long-range anti-ground type thing. It uses graphite and silicon, which is very convenient, as well as pyrite, which I'm actually not making on this map, which maybe I should, I don't know. It's also going to use plastinium and blast compound, both of which we haven't actually made just yet, but all in all, this is going to be able to do a massive amount of area damage by the looks of it, so that is very awesome to take out clusters of ground units. Also worth mentioning is that I can now build titanium walls, which of course have a lot more health than their previous editions, and that means that I can very much fortify my base. I also added in a secondary line because I noticed some of the larger units being able to shoot across my two-step wall, and this hopefully, yep, should not allow them to do that any longer. And as you can see, these new turrets are doing an awesome job at completely deleting the enemies, and even if they weren't, well, the enemy is not going to come through here anytime soon. Now, even with all of that, we're not quite done yet, but we have the last enemy wave incoming, so as soon as my tier 2 naval unit is safe, so I don't want to blow it up by triggering the enemy units, there we go, we should have the Guardian incoming, and the Guardian is just going to be a wave of other units, but yeah. You can see our pulsars doing their job, dragging in the enemy air units, and there we go, we have another sector captured without really taking any damage to the base whatsoever. But like I said, I'm not completely done just yet. Because not only do we have a ground unit that can repair its friends, we also have a naval unit that can do exactly the same, so why not produce some of those as well? For example, we have a coal centrifuge unlocked now, which is going to allow us to turn oil into coal. That might seem a little bit expensive, considering we first need to make the oil and we need spores for that, and we're probably going to get other ways of doing that. But we do need massive amounts of coal for just about everything, especially graphite and silicon are obviously very coal heavy. So having another option to make that, and at a pretty decent rate actually, is very useful. Which brings me to the multi-press that we just unlocked, because that's going to allow us to still make a graphite from coal by adding some water, but at a better ratio than what we've been doing so far, although it does come at the cost of power. All in all, this is going to once again allow us to upgrade the production, but as you can see, everything is going to get really resource intensive really quickly from this point on. Speaking of which, in order to make plastinium, we are going to need another building, the plastinium compressor, that is again going to use oil and, in this case, titanium in order to make that plastinium. So I definitely want to start making some of that, because that way I am prepared for whatever is going to come next. I should note we also have an upgraded version of the battery, a better version of the mender, as well as a repair turret that is actually going to be able to repair units. Oh, and then I mentioned we also get access to the cryo fluid mixer that is going to allow us to make cryo fluid from titanium and water, which along with some pyrite production is going to allow us to fuel the differential generator, which is going to supply us with a whole lot of power, which then of course is going to allow us to actually power all the other things I just named. Okay, so we have a couple of very simple pyrite mixers over here that are combining 3 items into one actually, so it's a little bit annoying considering how small the building is to actually get everything inside, but okay. The pyrite is being completely overproduced here honestly, because you don't actually need that much to generate the power from the differential generator, just 0.27 per second, and one of these can pretty much just power 3 of those buildings actually, just under 3, again, annoying ratios, but still. We also have the cryo fluid mixer over here that is turning titanium and water into cryo fluid, so that's an interesting combination. Again, this is a pretty efficient building, just 0.5 titanium. It needs a lot of water though. Speaking of needing a lot of water, I set up a plastinium compressor over here that needs quite a bit of spore stuff to go into a cultivator in order to make oil, into a spore press, that is, of course. And then we have the plastinium compressor using that oil along with the titanium again to make plastinium. Now, I was starting to wonder what to do about all these pumps. These are way too many pumps, by the way, but I just figured, like, I need a lot of pumps, might as well spam them. But we did actually now also unlock a new type of pump, the rotary pump. Now, this pump is way more efficient than the previous version. It can pump out up to 48 liquid units per second. So if I place it over here, as you can see, it's again a larger version of the pump. But this replaces about, what is it, 6 or 7 of these other pumps. So it's a lot more efficient, however, it does require some power. I'm going to want to set up a lot more of that plastinium production, however, because that will allow us to unlock the silicon crucible. This is a building that is just going to make silicon, and it still is going to use coal and sand to do so, but the ratios are way better than the previous version. Again, it does cost quite a bit of power, and it also needs pyrite. So that complicates things a little bit, but if you want a lot of silicon, then this building is going to do exactly that. So this should cover a lot of plastinium production. However, the main problem at this point is starting to be the titanium. This actually requires a fair amount of titanium, not all of that much, but you need titanium at this point in quite a lot of different things, which is where another new building is going to come in, which is the separator. This is going to allow us to produce all the basic resources out of slag, and all we need to do that is just make some slag, which is just putting in some scrap and spitting out slag as a result. Now, of course, that does mean that we need scrap on the map for this to actually work, but if we do, this is a very easy way to make all those basic resources, at least in small amounts, wherever we need it on the map, as long as we have some scrap around. And if that wasn't enough, we also get a couple of new turrets. We get the Swarmer, which is going to allow us to fire homing missiles at our enemies with use of Surge Alloy, Blast Compound, or Pyrite. Does a fair amount of damage, honestly. It also applies things like shock, burning, whatever we need to have on those particular enemies. And then on top of that, we're also going to get the Cyclone, which is going to fire explosive clumps of flak at nearby enemies, kind of like an AoE type of thing, which uses, for example, plastinium in order to do that damage. Doesn't seem to do a whole lot of damage, but it is quite a AoE type of thing. So as long as there's large groups of enemies, this is going to rip right through them. And then last but definitely not least, I've unlocked the unloader, which is going to allow me to unload items from blocks, which apparently includes my main base. That means that I can bring resources with me and use those resources to, for example, supply ammunition to my towers, supply base materials to my shipbuilding facilities, etc., which is going to be a massive help in speeding up the actual production in the early game. Now, speaking of production, I think I've done enough for this level. I could probably optimize these even further by removing some of the facilities and things like that. But I think we have things covered for now. So we're going to move on to the next level after I don't know how many times I've spent hours in this level already. As you can see, this is turning into an actual factory game. But I'm really enjoying that. So if you are still here, which I wouldn't be surprised if you're not, because this has been a complete rant of new technology. But if you're still here, you are awesome, and I definitely hope to catch you in the next one.